All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Matty. So I'm going to be talking about Colosseum, which is an organization that runs a hackathon, an accelerator, and a venture fund within the Solana ecosystem. And I'll explain throughout the presentation how those all connect together. But first, I'll start with a little bit about myself. I was the head of growth at Solana Labs and Solana Foundation for about 4 or 5 years. This is where I started the Solana Hackathon program, and I recently spun out just this year to found Colosseum with Clay Robbins, who was one of the first investors in Solana at Slow Ventures, and Nate Levine, who was engineer at Stripe. So the first sort of component about Colosseum is the hackathon. So we actually just ended a hackathon called the Radar Hackathon. Did anyone happen to participate in that? Okay, one person. Awesome. So these are actually the largest hackathons in the world. So they started out very small 4 years ago. We only had about 66 product submissions, but now we're all the way up to 1,000 submissions with our last hackathon. And so one thing to know also is that these aren't sort of traditional hackathons. You go to a high school gym or a conference, a conference center, and you drink a bunch of Red Bull for 48 hours and try to create a proof of concept. These are online only. They're over the course of about 6 to 7 weeks. And they're much more like the first engineering sprint for a new startup. And so the types of products that are submitted to these are much more advanced, and usually they even get to mainnet in a lot of cases. That is just to say that these are really competitive. So we've had about 80,000 developers participate in these over the last 4 years. And about 80% of all venture-backed startups in the Solana ecosystem had their genesis in these competitions. Either the founder started the company there, or they met their co-founders there. And so these have been obviously a very important pillar for the Solana ecosystem in terms of growing the startup ecosystem, but also the developer ecosystem broadly. And so that's where sort of Colosseum came in this year. So when we were thinking about like how do we continue scaling the hackathons, how do we continue growing the ecosystem, it became clear that this sort of needed to get spun out into its own full-time organization with its own full-time team dedicated to growing this. And so we thought, okay, let's first of all build sort of a platform that is like sort of custom built to how we run hackathons. So that was kind of step number one. Step number two was figuring out like how do we further support the top founders coming out of these hackathons, because before Colosseum existed, what would happen was that we would get about 40 winners out of every hackathon. We'd be like, all right, great, you guys are awesome. You guys need to now go find pre-seed funding from a bunch of VCs. And some would have success with that. And I think about $650 million in venture capital has gone into hackathons prior to Colosseum even starting. But it would take them maybe like six months to even a year to find that funding. And also just getting embedded in the Solana ecosystem and getting the connections they needed. And so we thought, okay, well, what if we sort of start a YC-like accelerator where instead of a college-style written application to get admitted, you have to go win our 6-week-long engineering sprint that is known as the hackathon. And so we started this accelerator. We raised a venture fund. So we raised a $60 million pre-seed venture fund to basically exclusively invest in these like top founders coming out of the hackathon. And we knew that like basically we would have a lot of confidence in these founders because they've sort of done the proof of work to show us throughout the course of the engineering competition that they're legit and that they're functioning at a very high rate in terms of like iterating and finding product market fit. So at a high level, this is what Colosseum is. We've built this sort of online platform. We have about 45,000 developers signed up for it right now. We just ran this hackathon Radar. And the platform is not just to run the hackathons. It's also to sort of stimulate co-founder relationships and finding kind of like product ideas to build in the hackathon. And so in Radar and in the previous hackathon Renaissance, about 10% of the winners actually found their co-founder on the platform beforehand. And so we feel that like just generally in crypto, you know, you may be interested in crypto, but none of your friends are, and you kind of go on crypto Twitter and you're trying to find your community. You know, a lot of people turn towards meme coins or NFT communities or whatever, which is maybe a decent way to find a community, but others like need to find, you know, someone to go build a product and a startup with. And so we wanted to create this platform where people could basically get matched, where, you know, if you had a certain set of skills, you could sort of come onto our platform and then test out that co-working relationship during the course of the hackathon. And so that's been one part of the platform that we've built out. The other part has been sort of this product idea forum. And so a lot of teams are like kind of wondering, oh, okay, what should we build? What are we passionate about? And so this forum sort of serves a purpose of sort of a testing ground of ideas that people can learn about and also like ultimately build during the course of the hackathons and see if it's something they will actually want to pursue full time as a startup. And so this is all what the Colosseum platform is today. And so after the hackathon is run, we basically run this 6-week accelerator program for the top 10 to 15 founders coming out of each hackathon. We invest $250K in their startups. We try to help them onboard into the ecosystem, get them the connections that they needed, the mentors that they need, connect them with all of these sort of former hackathon winners and top founders in the ecosystem who are part of the program. And we ultimately want to get them to the point where they can get to mainnet. Usually they land in DevNet during the hackathon, and ultimately get a seed round from other investors. And so the program culminates in this sort of demo day. And we've run one cohort so far. And what's interesting, I would say, is that you know, a lot of venture funds and a lot of people in crypto generally in the startup community are sort of following certain trends. And I would say a lot of the first startups that we've invested in are very counter to that trend. And so there's projects like Ore and MetaDAO and MeshMap, and these are projects that are really building, you know, very novel tech solutions. And so right now we're at the end of Radar. We're going through about 1,000 product submissions. We're going to try to find the 10 to 15 that we want to back and help onboard into the ecosystem, and and then do it all over again. And so at a high level, this is what Colosseum is, and that's basically all I had for the presentation. And so if you want to follow us, we have you can follow us at Colosseum on X, or colosseum.org if you want to come check out the site and maybe participate in the next hackathon. So that's it. I can probably take 1 or 2 questions. I don't know how much time I have here. 10 minutes, all right. If anyone has any questions, happy to take 10 minutes. Yeah, go for it.
Engineering, and I'm a software engineer myself, so like that's great. Yeah. But I know, like, having launched a bunch of projects in the space, that marketing is like a key differentiator. So how do you guys think about that in the companies that you back and support?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say so. The average team size has grown over hackathon. So now it's on average about 3 to 4 is sort of the team size for winning teams. And one of those team members is usually non-technical, either on the marketing or business or operations side. And that's actually something that we want to help with this co-founder matching platform. So you have a lot of people who are technical who are actually looking for a non-technical co-founder. And so actually that's a majority of sort of the matches that we see are one technical and one non-technical. And so I think that's like part of sort of the platform we want to double down on, is sort of helping people sort of find their match. And so a lot of people who participate in the hackathon, while it is an engineering competition, part of the submission is sort of like pitching your idea at the end of it. So there's like this presentation. Usually the non-technical person is like working pretty hard on that part of it, one of the parts that we really look for in terms of choosing winners is also like, have you talked to users? Like, have you already started the process of, getting into, creating a Twitter account, putting out the bat signal that you're even building this product, getting some initial feedback from potential users. It can be even a couple people, and seeing if you're on the right path, basically, to find product market fit by building out this MVP during the hackathon. So yeah, definitely lots of non-technical folks compete as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, in the back.
You mentioned that some of the projects you guys. Hi. You mentioned that some of the recent projects you guys have accepted are kind of counter to some of the narratives you see on crypto Twitter. Could you kind of expand on that and tell us about some of the ideas that you thought were really compelling and unique?
Yeah. I think one recent one. So there's a project called Ore, and Ore is sort of like Bitcoin on Solana. Is sort of a simple way. It's different, but I think like most people just don't create Bitcoin competitors anymore. They feel that like, hey, Bitcoin has sort of become the digital gold of the crypto ecosystem. There's really nothing else we can do there. It has so much liquidity. It has so much like institutional adoption. There's ETFs now. And I think one thing that we see interesting from like the Ore team was that they're like, what if instead of Bitcoin sort of going the direction it went with its decision to like ossify very quickly at the protocol level, to kind of take on this digital gold narrative, to kind of go away from sort of the payments narrative, the peer-to-peer cash narrative that was actually in the white paper. What if we could just start from scratch but do it on Solana? You don't have to worry about a lot of the consensus issues, because you can build on Solana. And so like we basically created this like proof of work token on a proof of stake network. And so I hadn't seen, at least personally, many like sort of competitive attempts at Bitcoin in a long time. There's obviously been like stable coins and stuff like that, but I think another one that comes to mind is this project called MetaDAO. So for those that don't know, there's prediction markets are kind of having a moment right now with the election, right? There's Polymarket. I think Polymarket actually hit #1 on the news section of the iOS App Store recently. And so people are sort of becoming interested in sort of betting on the outcome of events. Before that, though, before this whole prediction market thing happened, there was a project called MetaDAO that basically took that concept of prediction markets and applied it to like organizations generally. So the classic example is like, what if Amazon, instead of like the board of directors like deciding by vote whether to fire like Jeff Bezos, maybe they split the stock into two, and one was like keep Jeff Bezos and one was like fire Jeff Bezos, and then people would basically bet on which would have a higher share price, Amazon share price, if they took that decision. And so MetaDAO, this was a pretty out-of-the-box idea that I hadn't really heard about, at least in a while, or implemented, at least in Solana. It wasn't like the 1,000th DEX you've heard of, or AMM. And so I think that's like part of it's not just with Colosseum or hackathons, but hackathons generally, is that you see people really use their creative ability to come up with all sorts of wacky ideas. And like, part of the thesis of Colosseum is that some of those wacky ideas are actually really good ideas, and like that should be funded and taken to market.
We got another question coming up.
Yep.
Thanks for the presentation, first off.
Yeah.
Once your cohorts get that 250,000 initial investment, do you continue to kind of incubate or foster those teams, or do you kind of hand them off to the foundation and there's another program following?
No, so we sort of like vertically integrated as much as we could. So we run the hackathon as a first party. We run the accelerator program as a first party. So once we invest at the beginning of the program, we basically take them through a 6-week program of trying to, get them from DevNet to mainnet. So there's a technical process of that. There's the non-technical process, which is getting them connections to like potential partners, depending on what the product is, potential integrations, helping them sort of refine the product. I mean, these teams, I will say that like, because we're investing so early in these projects, that they're going to pivot often very quickly. In fact, like, when we invest in teams, it's mostly like a test of who they are as like a co-founding team, like how quickly they ship, the decision-making process, how they go through the decision-making process of prioritizing which features to build. But the product itself, like we're less actually concerned about than sort of the general market that they're going after. So part of the program is helping sort of direct where within that market they should be building a product and what that product should be. And so that's a whole part of the program. And then ultimately, yeah, I mean, $250K in crypto only gets you so far. Like there's audits that are expensive. There's all sorts of other like if they want to launch a token, there's legal costs and stuff of that. And so we found that after a couple months, they need to raise a seed round. And so we help them sort of get to that next stage and graduate to the seed. So yeah.
Coming this way.
Thank you, and wonderful talk. I actually participated not in Radar, but in Renaissance.
Oh, great.
And
Awesome.
I didn't make it to the end. I didn't ship. But I think I saw in the rules section, there's something about how like you shouldn't be shipping code that's more than 2 months old. And I wonder if you could clarify those rules and like, because I've been working on something which is a little deeper than what could be done in 6 weeks. And does that just disqualify me from Colosseum?
Right. So basically what we're looking for in the hackathon, regardless of when like people start the project, is like the work that they do from the start of the hackathon to the end of the hackathon. Now, some teams literally start at the beginning of the hackathon. That's when they start building. Some teams are like 2 months prior, and that's sort of the limit that we put on it. But it can be very difficult to figure out when exactly people actually start, because people can commit a bunch of code all at once, and it's hard to parse out when they would actually wrote that. But I generally, the spirit of these competitions is to be net new projects, and so we'll maybe extend that timeline to maybe like 4 or 5 months that you could have started building this product. But generally, we want to keep the competition somewhat even so that people aren't starting at a much more advanced stage. So one thing is we don't allow people to have raised any sort of venture funding prior to the beginning of the hackathon, because those people are more well capitalized. It makes the competition harder to judge. And so that's generally the rule. Is like, so right now the last hackathon was 2 months. We may extend it to like 4 or 5 months in the future. But that's also just on like a specific product idea. Like you see people who start, with one product idea. A good example, so one of the hackathon winners of the past is Tensor, which is like the most popular NFT marketplace in crypto, or in Solana. And they submitted to 3 different hackathons, all under the name Tensor, but they were all within sort of the NFT product space. One was like a data indexer, then it was like a full actual like user-facing application. And so it's okay to sort of like pivot within the same sort of like vertical. We just don't want people. The spirit of the rules is to like allow net new teams to compete against each other and not more mature teams.
Matty Taylor, this is super interesting stuff. I want to thank you very much for coming up and introducing us to Colosseum. Thank you very much. All right, now, devs.